Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Smith, and welcome to a special episode of Leadership Synergized. Maybe we call it Leadership Synergized Plus. I'm here today with my very special guest and great friend, Dr. Randy Mills. Dr. Mills has just completed a book that is near and dear to my heart and the hearts of many basketball fans, I'm sure, and it's getting ready to be published. It's a book about Larry Bird, the NBA Hall of Famer, from roughly about a half hour from where we're recording here today in French Lick, Indiana, my hometown, and where you'll find Springs Valley High School, the school that Larry started at throughout his high school career before advancing on to college fame and pro fame. But it was Dr. Mills who took a look and deep dive into Larry's senior year, the team's senior year of play, and how that transformation happened for Larry and in many ways for his Blackhawk fan. Dr. Mills, my friend, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here today and taking the time. I'm so excited for you. Just for full transparency, and I know I say this a lot on the program for those of you that follow, Dr. Mills instrumental in my earning my educational doctorate degree roughly 15 years ago now.
Wow.
Give or take. And he helped me with the dissertation aspect and spent more than 30 years in education, including many at the higher ed piece. But it was that public school piece in the state of Indiana teaching that you grew out of from your Illinois basketball stardom days that created that basketball interest. Talk a little bit about Randy Mills, the player, then the educator.
Well, I think I'm thinking about our start together, and which was before I started the book. I guess I would start this by saying that if you had told me back then, hey, Randy, you're going to be writing a book on Larry Bird, I would have told you you were crazy. But so be it. And writing's a journey. Surprises. I think what I'm good about, we've talked about this a lot in me working with you and your dissertation and other things, I'm good at connecting the dots of seeing how things connect. But there's always surprises in them. I think the first step in that is the book calling you. Again, I would have never thought I would have done a book like that. So how did that happen? Well, I want to go back to my Illinois days. I did a memoir book. I think you have a copy of.
Oh yeah,
about
good book.
My
Good book.
high school.
An almost perfect season.
An almost perfect season. It's actually a book about my father and I, which I didn't know when I started. It's just going to be about this really good basketball team I played on. But that's how a story will take you where it's going to go, and you're just along for the ride. And it's really almost a magical, supernatural experience. People will come forward in the book that you don't expect, and all these things happen in the Larry Bird book. But when I started the Larry Bird book, that was going to be a story of Larry Bird's, you've seen these clips, the Boston Celtic clips.
Mm-hmm.
He never makes a mistake, right? And so it's just perfect play. And that's how we remember him as a high school player, his senior year. But when you start looking and digging deep, there's these things that open up, and it wasn't like that necessarily at all. So I learned that in doing my own book, when I started writing it and making notes. And this is a key, and this was your big contribution here, but this is a scorebook. And when I started writing Larry's story, there was hardly anything out there about his high school days. Wouldn't you concur?
I agree.
Hardly anything.
Well,
and you were at those games because tell them your job at the game.
Well, I was the guy that filled up the water bottles and kept stats and did some things off to the side. So I keep some stats for the team and then keep my own scorebook. As a pretty young 14-year-old, it was kind of, wow, this is big time stuff, as watching a high school team in that regard. So it was quite an experience. And I'm, thinking back 50 years for me, almost 51 now, I'm not sure, at age of 14, you really get the full appreciation of what you're experiencing here.
No.
And maybe you couldn't because you didn't know what was ahead.
No. Well, you hadn't lived life.
Yeah.
You didn't know about.
Yeah.
We were talking about that earlier before we started. That the idea of sports that we never lose is crazy. that we learn much more by losing than winning. And so, but now we come back to Larry Bird because those clips show him as this person that always wins. That's not the story. The story is his struggles, these tremendous struggles, these moments when certain people came into his life or an event that turned him into the direction of his greatness. And I really believe, and we've talked about this before, that if one of those components had been missing, he'd still be in French Lick pumping gas or driving to Jasper to work in a woodworking factory or whatever.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you taking this project on, and we're going to talk not just in this episode. Dr. Mills has agreed to set for further episodes here in the upcoming weeks and months, with the book scheduled to be released when?
November the 5th is when it'll be available in bookstores.
November 5th. And the title of the book?
As If by Magic, the story of Larry Bird's Indiana high school basketball days.
Well, going back and just to finish where I was going, back in the 1970s, 1974, 1960s, and 50s prior to, local communities, small communities in particular, and French Lick has been a small community, French Lick, West Baden, Prospect, they didn't have their own radio stations. Typically didn't have daily newspapers. Right. And we know where the daily newspapers went in our society. It's on that digital side right now. But the publicity opportunity, you go back, and I still think one of the most amazing things, even then, Larry Bird wasn't Mr. Basketball in the state of Indiana.
No.
Didn't really garner much attention. If I'm not mistaken, it was a co-Mr. Basketball that year with Steve Collier from Hanover, Southwestern, that is, and then Roy Taylor.
Yeah, but it wasn't Larry.
Yeah, okay.
But we remember the one, but not the other very well.
Yeah.
Let me speak to that, because I think here's the key component to this story, that we look at Larry Bird and we automatically think success.
Easy, right?
Yeah, easy. And that he was as if by magic.
Yeah.
I used that title kind of in a fun way. And then I realized it wasn't magic. And you're going to see that real early in the book. I talk about all the hard work, the suffering, the moments, the key moments that made the difference. And maybe that was the magic that he worked through all that. But I want to talk about how he's looked at today, and I want to give you a story. My wife and I went to Tell City yesterday to look at the fall fold, and we stopped at a convenience store gas station there on Highway Interstate 64, and there was a guy there from Missouri. We got to talking. This is what older people do.
That's what we're doing today.
Yeah, where are you from? So we were talking, and they were on the bourbon tour, and I mentioned, I said, hey, you interested in basketball? He said, yeah. He said, hey, Larry Bird lives around here somewhere, doesn't he? and this guy's from Missouri, from Springfield or somewhere. Yeah. Everybody has a Larry Bird story, and that's how powerful that icon is. I compare him to Lincoln in that common people who know very little about history know about these certain iconic things that are bigger than life. But that's the problem. Larry had to earn it. And that's really the heart of my book, where I go back, and as you were saying, he made the all-star team, but he was, even at the end of his junior year, only Indiana State was interested in him. And that's only because they came to look at another guy named Steve Lance. So that's, to me, that's the magic. What's so interesting about it, this guy came out of nowhere. Let me tell you where my story starts intersecting here. So basketball, and I think this is why basketball is so important to especially males and females now, because they've got some great play going on now. It's amazing, isn't it? What's happened with
a lot of growth in the past few years.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'd almost rather watch that.
I'm there with you. I agree.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, good fundamental basketball, kind of from the 60s and 70s, that what I call that golden age. But when I played in high school, I came from a rural area. I could drive a tractor, sort of, if I was thinking, and I sure couldn't fix one.
Well, they had clutches then too, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't have any problems with that. My mind was on history, and my brother, who was very successful, less than a year older than me, got all the attention for that. So I was just kind of out there. Nobody's paying much attention to me, but I was big and I was strong. And I went to this little bitty, tiny rural grade school, and then the high school only had 100 people in it. Well, this is single class basketball. So my sophomore year, out of nowhere, I'm starting. we got a new coach. He didn't know who was what. And I started with seniors, which was really tough on me as a sophomore, because that was my big problem, dealing with those seniors that didn't like a senior being knocked out. But I ended up starting and doing very well. I just loved it. We won one game, but my dad started going to every game, and we drew closer during that time. It was the only time really I was close to my father, because he was a very quiet, introverted man. I think his World War II experiences, we forget World War II traumatized people, really shut him down. But boy, we would talk going to and from the games about the games, and he got really excited about it because he was living vicariously. And I loved it. I loved the attention I was getting. And finally, old farmers were coming up to me because I was getting my name in the paper and says, wow, that's really good. They didn't know anything about basketball. They admired that, as you would in the Midwest basketball at that time in the 60s. So this would have been 67, 68. So my next year, we got another coach. So we'd won one game the year before. The next year, we won 21 games. And single class basketball, about 100 kids in high school. And that's pretty neat. And for about the first half of the season, I was the leading scorer. And then something happened, which I talk about in my book, won't go into, but girls and basketball doesn't mix very well, I should say that. And I ended up doing well, but we had scorers, and I had been a scorer, and I just didn't like the pressure. I was a pretty sensitive kid, I guess. The next year, we won 25 games in a row. So I played on the worst team my high school ever had, and I played on still the best team record-wise.
Quite a turnaround.
Quite a turnaround. So I've been to the heights and the depths of all that, and it drew me close. We got beat, as you would in the single class basketball. You run pretty quick into those bigger schools. We got beat by Doug Collins, who just went into Naismith Hall of Fame. How
Great
about that?
player.
Great
76ers,
Yeah.
Coach Michael Jordan early with the Bulls.
And we played him close. But we just hadn't played the bigger teams. We had the ball with 2 minutes to go. We were 2 baskets behind, and our best player charged. And I think Collins scored about 3 baskets. Boom, boom, boom. That was it. But it was a wonderful season, and an almost perfect season, 25-1. We lost our first game.
That's the title.
That's the title. But I tell you that to tell you my interest in basketball.